Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another one of our exciting webinars for the Georgia Department of Education. I'm Megan Endicott. I am your elementary and middle school general music PLC lead and moderator. And today our webinar is all about assessments. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about assessments, because I know right now it's a really big thought on our minds. It's something we haven't talked about yet. So let's get started by talking about assessment types. So we know that there are three types of assessments, and we're going to look at those kind of on an overarching big view, I guess, if you will, just kind of the big picture. And then we're going to spotlight and focus on diagnostic assessments today. And then in our next webinar, we'll get into formative and summative, and I'll be happy to give us some examples and talk about things like that with you. So kicking this off is our diagnostic assessment. The diagnostic assessments are moments where the teacher will ask questions of the students to check for understanding prior to the teaching of the concepts. So that means you should plan to either conduct a diagnostic assessment a class period or two before you start your new unit of study, or maybe even, if you're going to do it the first day of your unit of study, think of a way to engage the students to continue their learning throughout that day. Now, when we start looking closer into diagnostic assessments, and I share a couple of different ideas and thoughts with you, we can start looking at, exactly what does that mean and what does that look like? How can you diagnose, basically, how can you pre-assess your students and then give them something meaningful to do through differentiated instruction and tasks? So we're going to get into that a little bit more. Let's just look at some examples of diagnostic assessments, okay? So we know that the main purpose of the diagnostic assessment is to inform the teacher about a couple of things. It's to inform them about what does your group know or understand, what do individuals know or understand, of course, what are some common misconceptions that you are going to need to debunk to make sure that the students are in the right mindset, right, from prior knowledge. Sometimes when we look at prior knowledge, sometimes it's correct information and sometimes they've been misleaded, or maybe they just have their own vision or concept of what is reality when it's not. You can also look and see what concepts have been mastered so that you know not to focus so much attention on those particular concepts. And then you could dig in deeper to the ones that they don't know very well. And you can use this to inform specific guided instruction and to customize your lesson plans. This also helps you, the diagnostic assessment, group your students into those differentiated groups. This will also help you with personalizing learning so that your students can get the information that they need in the way that's just right for them and focuses on what they're doing. So the diagnostic assessment is pretty important. And I think a lot of times we tend to skim over that piece because maybe we didn't plan ahead, or maybe we're just kind of moving too quickly and we think, it's okay, right? Because I taught these kids last year, so I should know what they know. But I think a lot of times too, when you think about summer learning loss, the diagnostics assessment is so important and crucial that we go back and we really look at it. So make sure that you take the time to do those diagnostic assessments. Okay, so next up, of course, is the cyclical process of the formative assessment. Okay, so that's why I like that little cycle sign at the top, right? It's a cyclical process. We know that the formative assessment should be happening a lot, right? These are the things that should be happening daily. And they can be formal, they can be informal. But these are the things that tell you along the way and your student, what do they know and what do they still not know? And that helps us with our teaching, but it also helps our students know what to focus on themselves. So here's just a couple of examples of ways that people are using formal assessments in their classrooms. So for formal formatives, we have journaling, sorting, all of the short answers, extended answers, multiple choice questions, basic performance tasks. I love to tie my performance tasks to rubrics, but more specifically when we're talking about a quick formative checklist. Checklists are great things for kids to do a quick, analysis on how do they do. Music games are great, diagrams, reading rhythms and pitches, singing and playing. conferencing, which I can't wait to get into in our next unit, our next webinar, talking about formative assessments and exit slips. There are also informal ways to help you go along and check your students very, I guess this is easily, right? Because these aren't things that require a whole lot of tracking and data analysis. This is more of an overarching view. There are peer observations, self-assessments, reflections, movement activities. Anytime you have them think, pair, and share. Stations can be considered informal, formatives, teacher observations on techniques and performance tasks and things of those natures. In our next webinar, we're really going to dig into what is formal and informal formative assessments and how can we use them and how can we offer feedback to our students. I think that's going to be a really exciting webinar. I have lots of great resources that I found along the way to share with you. I've learned a lot from some of my colleagues that I can't wait to share with some things that their insight as well. So that's our next webinar. We'll get into formative assessments as well as summative assessments. So we know then that summative assessments are formal in nature, and they should reflect what the student has learned across several lessons, or ideally a unit of study. While we're currently working toward bridging the gap in student education or academic loss, summative assessments should not look the way that they have in the past, especially right now during our days of this remote learning, switching back and forth and things like that. Instead, think about grouping learning targets inside of the standard, and that will help you measure the summative growth. So instead of giving one huge summative assessment, think about chunking those and giving them periodically throughout the unit. I know it's a whole different concept here, but I'm also finding that this might be a best practice that we learn to adapt to, because we're still assessing our students. They're still having to master things. But the way we're assessing them is actually getting their brains to be a little less, stressed, lots of anxiety with big tests. It's hard to remember everything. They come to music once a week for 45 minutes. So this new process could be really good. We're going to dig into summative assessments again, also in the next webinar. Today, we're going to spotlight those diagnostic, but we're going to get into what that could look like for you too. And maybe as a team, as this wonderful learning community, we can share some ideas of your thoughts on the process and how you're doing things in your classroom so that we can learn and grow from each other. We are definitely in uncharted territory. So let's keep in mind the importance of using those formative checks, though, to measure the understanding along the way, so that when we get to these summative tests, the kids are successful and the tests are meaningful. So if your student fails a summative test, you should have plenty of additional data and from your formative assessments along the way to tell you that they probably were going to fail the summative. And hopefully by then you will have gotten them caught up so they wouldn't fail that summative. But that's the whole process, right? Students shouldn't be not successful at a summative if they've been working toward the formative assessments and you've been giving them feedback to learn from their mistakes. So let's look at a couple of these summative assessments. These can be things like written assignments, projects, whether it's an individual project or a group project, compositions, performance-based tasks, again, tied to a rubric or a checklist. When we're looking at a summative task, we want to get into something that's a little more meaty, like a rubric versus a checklist that's tied to the learning target or the standard, so that the students really know, did I get it? And what parts did I not understand? That also helps them guide in their work so that they're making sure that they're getting to the correct end goal that you want. And conferencing, again, one of my favorites that I think is underutilized that we're going to get into next time. So let's talk about assessment in the classroom. And we're going to answer some questions like, what does the assessment in general look like in our classroom? And how does it look virtually and digitally? What kinds of assessments do I use in my classroom that have benefited my classroom or been beneficial? What are some obstacles that have been blocking the way from student success with assessments? And then how did I overcome them? And we're going to talk about how to keep students engaged in that particular assessment, which we know can be kind of tricky. So one of the largest challenges of the year has been assessing so that you're working smarter and not harder as a teacher. And I know that many of us are in the same boat, and just like me, because you've got a blend of things. You've got a blend of kids that are face to face. You got kids that are online, and you're trying to find ways to assess everybody and reach both populations. And it is tricky. So I find that the key is finding a blend that works best for both students. So here are two versions of what a summative assessment could look like and ones that I've used in my class. Now, of course, I know we're talking about diagnostic assessments. We're going to dig into that, but I kind of wanted just to get into, something that you guys could relate to, something that you're probably living right now. We're currently wrapping up our whole unit on expression and movement, and so I just thought I would bring something that's my classroom has been working on. So these are things that my students at face-to-face would normally do, right? On the left side here, where it's talking about our third grade expression summative assessment, it's a pretty quick assessment. I made sure it wasn't meaty on purpose. This is our third grade students getting into some different expression terms, right? We've got tempo, we've got dynamics, we've got articulation. And I wanted it to be quick. And I'm going to get into that a little bit when I talk about my tips and tricks for you and my suggestions, things that I have found successful. And short and sweet is the way to go. If my kids are able to hear something and mark appropriately using appropriate vocabulary, they've done it. They've accomplished that. We don't need to spend a 50-question paper on deciding, did they get it? This is efficient. This is good enough for me to see, did they hear it? Did they know it? And I feel very happy with that. It's quick. They can listen to audio prompts in class real quick, and it works. So on the right side, I had to get a little more creative with my students at home, right? So my kids at school went analog. We went old school. They had paper pencil. But my kids at home, it's really hard to do paper pencil, especially with, technology glitches, or what happens if not everybody's in attendance, and then you've got to figure out makeup work. You've got kids who don't always have access at the time that they need access. So I created a little short video prompt. It's kind of a mini lesson, actually, for my virtual learners. So there is a video prompt. There are video examples of expression. And included in all that is a mini lesson that reteaches the information that they need to know. Then I encourage them to record themselves demonstrating the sound as well. So, for example, right, if I found in this picture here are leaves that are blowing very slowly, so I said the leaves were moving adagio. I found a little bee that was buzzing in the bushes, and I said, of course, after screaming because the bee was trying to chase me, and I was like, ah! I said that the bee was moving much faster. The bee was moving allegro. And then I played with some just fun things with the screen and made, my own children demonstrate things, and they were moving, super speed and super slow. So the kids could get an idea of using vocabulary. But what was exciting is the students started submitting their own work, and instead of just finding things in nature that moved fast and slow, they were playing and making sounds that were fast and slow. They were playing and making sounds that were loud and soft, which actually lines better with the standard. So the kids actually outsmarted me, and they did better than I was hoping. And I learned a valuable lesson, right? Hey, I probably need to be a little more specific about how does this tie into music? And so the kids basically just submitted a virtual assignment, a digital assignment, where they sent back video with demonstrating their knowledge and tying it to that particular vocabulary. So we're going to check out and see what my prompt looks like and how I tied it all together. So let's check it out. Hey everybody, hope you're having a great and wonderful day. Very excited about playing today with tempo. And I thought it would be fun for us to play with tempo out and about to find our own found sounds. Now I know that sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate, so if you want to do something inside your house, or if you want to take it outside the house another day before next week, what I want you to do is think about the word tempo. We know that tempo is the speed of music. And we know that we do not use the words in English. We use the words in another language. Italian. Hopefully you remember that. If I were to give you the Italian words for tempo, starting with our slowest tempo, going to the fastest tempo, it would be largo, then followed by adagio, moderato, allegro, and presto. So we know that largo being very slow, adagio is slow, moderato is medium, allegro is fast, and presto is very fast. We also talked about some classes we talked about how the tempo can change. The speed of music can get faster or get slower. Accelerando is getting faster and ritardando is getting slower. So you could also think about that. So think about some things around your house or maybe outside your house, and maybe it's yourself, to show tempo, and then tell me the term that matches. I made a little video for you of my kids last year playing with and things in the environment that are fast and slow, and Mr. Denny also made some videos of fast and slow. And we labeled them. So check it out. See if you too can find things fast and slow and drop it in Seesaw. All right, guys. I can't wait. Bees. Ooh, move fast. Yeah, they're all. What were the ones where she had to come fast? The leaves in the wind are slow. Harper is slow. Harper is fast.
All right, it's Mr. Denny again. Today we're going to talk about slow and fast. Today you're going to get to see the feet of my children and also my cat, Callie. So here we go. Slow feet. And fast feet. Slow cat. Fast cat. Okay, so don't forget, when you're making your video, you can make your own iMovie. If you really want to play with something techie on your device, you could also just on Seesaw, click on the page and add the video right on there by clicking on the little camera button and then record. And if you wanted to record several things, you can record several things on your page, or you can click add new page at the very bottom corner and then make another video and add another page, make another video. However you want to do it, I'm going to leave it up to you, but I do want to see some videos, okay? Super excited. Have fun. Now I want to talk to you about some things that I felt were more successful with my assessments as we're going through and navigating these new waters, right? One of the things is to remember to be brief, okay? See my little stopwatch there? Be brief, okay? We see our students spend a little time on, they don't want to spend time on excessive assessments, and we don't have time to do that with them. And we don't want to just give them a giant assessment just for the sake of giving them assessment. That should not be our goal, right? Our goal is to have meaning and purpose for these things. We want to focus on checking for student understanding to see where they are and where we need to take them. We need to see if we can help them, with small groups, things like that, right? We want to take this, chunk it up, be brief, get what we need, and get out of there, okay? The other thing that I found successful, and I'll tell you, going back to that little chunking thing and then those quick, brief assessments, the kids don't feel like I'm constantly testing them. They're not like, oh, I don't want to go to music. She's going to test us again. It's more like, oh my gosh, okay, whatever. We're going to do this thing real quick and then we're going to get to the stuff, okay? So be brief, okay? Keep that in mind. I promise you, your kids are going to be happier. I'm sure most of you are brief. If you're not, consider that change and just see what happens in your classroom. The other thing is, give the kids a chance to work in small groups or with partners and work on creative projects.
I have found such success with the kids having an opportunity to deepen their learning and their understanding when they're working with knowledgeable others. So they're able to really take their thoughts, their misconceptions, spin it around with somebody else, go back and forth, debate a little bit, come out on the top, right? These rich, valuable discussions also help the teacher, when you're walking around listening, hear and see exactly what is it the kids need to know. One of my favorite things I've ever done was record my classes using my swivel camera. It has little markers that record other like small groups, which you can do with any device. If you just set up little cameras or your phone to record your classes while you're teaching, of course, with permission from your students, you can actually hear what they're saying. My kids were learning some rhythms, and in their small groups, they were saying things like, yeah, no, it's this one. It's da 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 da. And then I was like, no, it's bebop, bebop, bebop. And I was like, wow, their rhythms are great. They can clap them. I can hear them, but they are not using the right counting terms at all. And I wasn't quite sure that I don't even know if I would have caught it had I not really gotten the opportunity to record them in that way. So having these small group discussions can help everybody in the end. And it really gets the kids thinking outside the box in different ways. So here is an example of my students this year working as socially distant as we can with our masks on, talking about in wrapping up our expression unit in a different way. So instead of them doing a traditional summative assessment where they're just circling and listening to things, I wanted a little bit of a higher order opportunity where they were able to go through and then tell me, answer certain questions as a group, as a team. You'll notice there's a pocket of students that are working together. You'll also see on the screen a group of kids that are my remote learners. This is in a simultaneous or hybrid class. And I just basically muted our classroom so that we weren't so annoying to them and turned their volume down so they weren't really loud in our ears. And I let them work together in a group. One kid was the presenter and shared their screen, and they were able to still do the same, accomplish the same goal with small group learning. So check it out.
Dynamics are the volume. And that's what we know.
So that's just a quick peek at what the kids are doing. So let's talk about some obstacles. We don't like to talk about those, but those are the ones that we learn the most from, isn't it? The biggest obstacle that I've had to hurdle with assessments has been finding creative ways to tie assessment types to align with both my face-to-face and my virtual kids so that there's only one assignment and one spot to grade and view. I start off working on with the traditional teacher observations during class with students that were in the room and offering asynchronous time for students that are virtual kids to work and record and submit their work. And then while it was so much fun for the kids at school, it felt very normal. It felt like we were doing the same, routines and procedures, and my kids at home were having more fun being creative and being able to submit their work. And, I don't know, they had more fun with it. I had a hard time keeping up with all of the assignments, right? So I'm trying to track and measure kids one way and then a different way. And especially the virtual kids, there's so much coming in because it's all independent and individual versus my group stuff. We've got like 500-600 kids. We really need to figure out how to make that process easy. And it was mind blowing. It was very difficult to do that. So having kids, at home instead, now I'm like, okay, you know what? We're all gonna meet together at the same time. And if you're at home, you're just gonna, when I call on you, you're gonna unmute, you're gonna perform for the class. Sometimes I can screen share or spotlight the kids while they're performing. And then the kids at school can still be performing. And it was a smarter way of working. So instead of having two separate tasks, let's combine them all together. And I know hopefully most of us have already figured that piece out. I think I was trying to be a champion and a hero. And then I realized, you know what? I can make this fun in other ways. But today, if I need you to do a movement task, because we were just finishing up our movement unit, and I need you guys to show me creative ways to move, I'm going to let you all do it. So I'm going to show you two different versions of the same thing that's been happening in my class. I wanted to spread out since we were moving, and fortunately I have a big space in my school. I was allowed to go and spread out to move. So one video I'm going to show you is basically a portable screen, which would be just like if you had access to an interactive whiteboard or a projector where you're showing the kids on the screen. And I just had the kids at home on the screen, and I took my computer and just turned it so that my camera was facing the kids in the classroom moving, and I had them all moving simultaneous, and I was able to very quickly assess everybody at one time. Right? No brainer. Should have thought about that the whole time. And then the second video I'm going to show you is going to have it just so that I'm just watching everybody. So it's more about my experience with the kids and less about the kids' interactivity with one another. So it's just I need to assess what are they doing on the screen, what are they doing in my face, and be able to track and monitor. So let's check out the first one where it's a little more interactive. The kids in the school face-to-face can see the virtual kids, and the virtual kids can see the face-to-face kids. So it's a little more community. So let's check it out. Okay, and here's the next one.
Oh, anyway but walk. Next group, go. Next group, go. Love it.
So I know that doesn't look very rigorous, but those are the kids moving anyway but walk. It was a great example to show you how you can very easily assess students all in one spot and one time if they're able to log on live, right? So if they can't log on live, I always go back to here is a prompt, here is a quick mini lesson video, and then I want you to submit a video to share back. You could do that in almost any digital platform, right? Kids can use their Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams. You can use things like Seesaw, Padlet. You can drop in videos. There are many places kids can make videos and share with you. So let's talk about tips for keeping students engaged, okay? So here's some things to remember to keep your students engaged in the assessment assignment because they don't want to take tests. Nobody wants to take tests. I don't want to take tests. I know you don't want to either. So how do we keep our kids from just kind of quitting on us or just, trying to get through the task to be done? Well, chunking. And chunking can be something where you actually divide your tests up so that there are smaller tasks on independent days, or it's just visually chunking your actual sheet, right? So if I group my questions and I task them so that they look more pleasing to the eye, we're like, okay, so I only have like 4 questions on tempo. I've got like 4 questions on dynamics. I've got, 2 short answer questions. I can do this. It just makes the kids think, okay, check, check, check. It breaks things up. It's going to help your kids who have things like ADHD stay more focused on the task. So keep those things in mind. If they're working on a project or if it's just a performance task of some sort, checklists are great. That keeps the students engaged because they think, okay, I've got to do this, and this. So having that task-oriented piece, I find has been very successful in keeping the students engaged because when you check that little box, there's some satisfaction there to keep going. Group projects and group work assignments, I've already preached about that. I am a firm believer in the power of working with a knowledgeable other, but also, honestly, it's more fun for the kids because they don't feel like they're alone in this task. It's not as boring, right? I hate to use that word, but it's true. So they want to do something. And the last thing is to consider having a product for an authentic audience. Okay. So if I've got kids that are going to be maybe they're going to draw some rhythms and I tell them I'm going to post this on Twitter. And so your families can see it. They're like, oh my gosh, someone's going to see it. Okay. Or I'm going to make a video recording of your whole class performing this and I'm going to share it on social media or on Padlet or somewhere else. Then again, they're feeling more excited because they've got an audience that's going to see their work and they're going to be able to take it to that next step. So products for an audience also helps them out, even if it's an assessment, right? Who are you going to share that with? Are you going to post it outside? Are you going to track the data maybe on a chart and show everybody how much they've grown as a class? Things like that. Kids like to have some sort of, results. What happens next? So it's not just I'm going to submit this and get a grade, right? So things to consider there. So let's talk now about diagnostic assessments in particular. Let's look. So I think there is something really important for us to remember, right? Planning with purpose. So there are 3 really important questions that educators should ask themselves when they begin the planning process. And it should be something that you ask yourself, or it could be a great discussion for your professional learning community. These questions should be discussed prior to the planning and periodically through and during the process. These questions definitely guide good planning, and I'm sure you've heard these before. These are not new. What do your students already know? What do your students need to know? And how do you know if they've learned what you've taught them? Okay, so these are great PLC guiding questions. And these are used, and they actually move through all of our different assessment checks. But it definitely includes our diagnostic. So let's look at the diagnostic assessment. I found this little graph, this little chart, and it made me really go, oh, you know what? That is so true. Okay, so I thought I would share with you. We know that the diagnostic assessments are moments where the teacher will ask the questions of students to check for understanding prior to your students, teaching your students, right, the concept. We know that you got to plan to conduct that diagnostic assessment before you start your new unit. These are things I talked about in the very beginning of our webinar. And you want to make sure that whatever activities you have that are there, to start off class, maybe you're starting your diagnostic on the first day of the unit, that you're tying those into that particular concept. So let's look at this. If we look at this little chart here, we know the diagnostic assessment assists the teachers to gain a current understanding of the situation. It provides the knowledge on how to improve the student's practice. It helps you understand what resources you're going to need to pull to help your students, right? And that's based on their successes and their struggles. Then that's when you start getting into the taking the action piece so that you can improve learning outcomes. So the diagnostic assessment is probably one of the most important things that we do. And I think we really, again, either underutilize it or we kind of just toss it to the wayside like, man, I'm just going to give this and move on. So let's not just give it and move on, okay? Here is an example of some formal diagnostics. So like I mentioned earlier, diagnostic assessments can also be formal in nature or informal in nature. The purpose of the diagnostic assessment is not to give something so profound that you have this massive, impressive documentation of what students know. Rather, it's something that you have that says, you know what, my kids know this, and they don't know this, and this is how I'm going to teach them. And this particular student population does this well, and this student population needs help with this. Things like that, okay? So you're going to see here 2 different versions. There's one that's a little more meaty. It gives you a little more information. And the second one is something that's just pulled straight from a resource book. Many of you have your own district-approved curriculum. And if you look through those, you can find ready-made assessments. Some of these can be pieces pulled from a unit assessment, and some can be specific diagnostic assessments. A lot of the resources pulled from your curriculum books can also include their own tracks so that you have some music and audio to go along with it already. So those things are already out there and they exist if you just kind of give a little peek-see through your things. Or you can create your own. I kind of created my own. You can find different resources that have things that are fast and slow, loud and soft. For example, this is all expression to give you an idea. YouTube has great resources when you're trying to look for something quick to play, some music. You can also do a quick Google search to see, what songs are traditional classical music that's fast. If you want a quick pick, if you just want to change things up. So there are some great resources out there. And here's just some examples of some quick diagnostic assessments that are a little more on the formal side. They have a piece of paper, they're listening for things, they're circling, they're marking. But informal checks are also fine for diagnostic assessments. This can help you kind of see what the kids know. So you're going to see here that students can be assessed both diagnostically, both formally and informally. And here's just a few quick ways that I use to see what my students know. And they can be independent or they can be collaborative. I think it's fine. Again, you're just trying to see what do they know, how are you going to teach them, okay? In the top corner, the students are sorting and organizing content. They're trying to make decisions on vocabulary words. This is a collaborative effort, and it helps the teacher also visually assess what the students know, and it also offers the opportunity for the teacher to listen for those misconceptions and Are they realities? And as they're walking through the process, you can kind of also understand, not only what are they thinking, or, what prior knowledge are they unlocking, but what direction and route are they going? And when you really listen to that, especially with your older kids, you get a better sense of how do they learn, okay? And how can you teach them, And some of them you can fix real quick. You can walk right by and fix those misconceptions. And some of them might be a little bit of a bigger problem. So you want to make sure that you carve in some time to actually teach them the correct way and why. So the students on the right side here are all my remote students. They were given a prompt. There was a little audio example and they were told to answer. There was just a listen for how many times did you hear? That was the prompt. And they showed in the camera real quickly the number. They were asked several questions that were kind of on the same lines. And I was able to look and see very quickly, who gets it, who doesn't get it. Giving them multiple opportunities also gives you a chance to look and see, do they get better over time after you've given them a little bit of prompting, right? Or do they still not get it? Maybe it was the first time they were like, I thought it was 5. And you're like, well, I think you're listening to the wrong thing because it was 3. And then you play it again and something new. And they're like, oh, I get it. Did they fix it? Did they not? How does that guide your instruction moving forward? So these types of things work well for quick checks. Again, making sure there's multiple prompts for those younger students because they need that. Students on the bottom left took time to independently write out their names using rhythms and show what they know to kick off the rhythm unit in first grade. So they just kind of real quick did a performance task. And I was able to look and see, they were to clap and say their name and see if they wrote it right, if they remembered from last year. That gave us a good starting point for rhythmic dictation and composition. So quick little checks like this helps you decide, okay, how am I moving forward? What do my kids know? What do they still need to know? But, one of my favorite things is to remember that whatever you do is informing the next instructional steps. So a good friend of mine, Susan Ahmad, incredible Georgia music teacher. I know most people probably recognize that name right off the bat. She is like a master at coming up with differentiated instruction and personalizing learning for students. And so I borrowed this from her because it's a clever way to very quickly do a diagnostic assessment on your students and then immediately sort and group them into a meaningful activity to help them further their learning for that day. So say, for example, you go, you know what? I'm going to start my unit off with a diagnostic assessment and then we're going to get right into it. Okay? Well, then take some of Susan's advice. Looking here on the wall as the students are walking in, there is a melody chart on the wall, and the kids are looking at their patterns here. Then they come to the wall and they give a high five for the one that matches. And so they go, you know what? This is the pattern right here on the bottom. So she comes over and she gives a high five on the bottom pattern. Well, because she selected the blue hand, she gets to join the blue team. Each of these particular centers are leveled in such a way that it matches kind of how the students answered. Okay, so if they answered correctly, they get to have something that's a little more extended above and beyond. If they answered way off, then they're going to have something that's more remedial. And if they were kind of right there in the middle, their answer, then they get to do something that's going to be catered to just kind of honing in on those skills. So you can see here, they'll go, oh, I slapped the blue hand, I'll go here. And they didn't even know because this part can change. So it's not like, you know what, if I slap this hand, I know I'm going to be with my friends. So we're all going to slap purple. Because sometimes you just make sure you change this piece up so it's not always the same. Pretty clever, right? So keeping in mind, how do I give a quick diagnostic assessment? I'm going to stand on the hall. I'm going to chart and mark them real quick. And then I'm going to send them off. They're going to be independent when they're here. And then I'm going to send them to their groups. And they're going to get started on these activities. I'm just saying, it's brilliant. Things to consider. All right, so we've talked about some things that I've used in my classroom, but you may or may not know there are some great valuable resources that you can access right at the Georgia DOE website. So I'm going to show you how to find these things, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of some diagnostic assessments that are already there waiting for you just to kind of grab and take with you, which is exciting.
So if you go to the Georgia DOE website, georgiadoe.org, and if you click on the tab that says Learning and Curriculum, and you find here Fine Arts. Once you click on the Fine Arts and you scroll down a little bit, you're going to see instructional resources for fine arts teachers, and then you'll click on Remote Teaching and Learning Plans. Okay? Easy peasy. Okay, once you get there, you're going to see some sample digital learning plans, and they're adding to this as we speak. There's going to be a couple more lesson plans to fill in some of these gaps, and you'll notice it kind of covers the gamut of things, so that if you're really looking for that form lesson, but maybe you wanted to teach it for third grade, you can take the things from the fourth grade one and you can bump it and change it to make it work for you. But these are great resources, samples, of course, that you can take and you can run with. So here's a quick little thing, okay? Look how easy this diagnostic assessment idea is. It's ready for you. It's there. Identify repeating and contrasting sections in music, creating a new form using Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Okay, so that's a great example. Here's another example. This is from a first grade lesson. You'll see right here, it is on the second grade lesson, pitch and melody lesson plan. Okay, and you'll see there are two versions. There is the unplugged activity here, and then there is a plugged activity. So you're going to see options so that students that are working remotely with the teacher virtually, they can do the plugged activity. And for those students who are unable to access the class maybe live, there is an option for unplugged. And so all of these things can be found right inside of your Georgia DOE information. So very excited to share that with you. I hope you guys remember to go there and use those resources. You can also find some really great additional webinars that have been recorded just for you. So don't forget, again, to use these resources. These are all wonderful things to check out. And of course, if you want to follow me, this is how you get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me right here at the Georgia DOE community. I really want to get these conversations going, so please leave some messages, answer some of those prompts. We can get back and forth with one another. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or of course, my website. Don't forget to follow our wonderful Georgia DOE Fine Arts team. We've got 3 awesome people to keep in touch with. You can find them in the community. You can also find them on Twitter, and their email addresses. They're very accessible, and they're ready to reach out anytime you need them. And of course, don't forget to follow all the things that are happening on the Georgia DOE website and their social media channels. All right, you guys, listen, can't wait to continue that conversation, and join me again for the next webinar. We're going to dig into deeper on formative and summative assessments. Bye, guys.